I feel like I dodged a bullet. Long story, not very short. I'm creeped out to the point it's been almost 9 years later, and it's keeping me awake. I'm actually thinking of reporting my encounter with a man to the police in that area, due to a crime committed there last year. So 9 years ago, there was a guy I was casually talking to. I was going through a tough time, and he knew that. Randomly one night at like 2 a.m., he just shows up outside my dorm in his car, pretty much pleading with me to come out to visit him. Eventually, I conceded. I come out to his car, and he was so charismatic, but something unnerved me. He asked me to get in, and made me feel a bit silly for being so reluctant to get in. I told him I'd have to send my mom his name, number, and photo. I didn't understand why my body was nervous, but my mind hadn't caught on. He was super smooth talking. He said, "Fine, go ahead and send my name and number." But he managed to dismiss the photo thing. I got in, but I told him not to turn the car on. We chatted for a bit. He turned the car on and began to pull away. He was really flirtatious and charismatic, assuring me he was hungry and he'd buy me something to eat. He did, but while we are in the drive-thru, he turns to me, snaps a picture of me, with flash. No explanation. We weren't dating. It didn't make sense. Anyway, he took me back home. He made a comment like, "I brought you back." That felt odd. Weeks pass, and he shows up again. 3 a.m. I go with him. He was enjoyable to talk to. And remember, he brought me back last time. This time he's driving me somewhere much farther away, and I had noticed he had a 24-pack of alcohol in the back seat, already ripped into. He takes me to where he's staying. It's a quiet neighborhood. He has one single key, opens the door, says it's a friend's house. Yet it looked unlived in. It was furnished like an elderly person lived there. There was a box TV in the bedroom too. Next thing I know, there's metal pressed to my temple. I was calm, thought I heard BBs. So I asked him if he was being serious. He didn't speak. A long moment stretched, and he lowered the rifle, which I made the judgment was a BB gun, which I felt posed no threat. Though I knew this was beyond creepy. From that point on, it's like he didn't know what to do with me. We looked out on the balcony. He watched a movie with me on some pirated website. He had no belongings there aside from the clothes on his back and his laptop. To spare details, I'll just say we had sex. It was obvious he didn't intend to take me home. I made a judgment call to ensure creepy is all it was and didn't venture into danger. He randomly attempts to shave my pubic area, to which I immediately stop him, calmly, but physically preventing him. He relented after I physically restrained him. After that, he pulls out his phone and he's showing me pictures of a blonde woman he used to be with, talking about her like he couldn't see her again. I was nice and just listened. He got a bit emotional. The next morning, he's reluctant to take me home. He takes me home. I peeped some official-looking crumpled papers in his console with his real name on it. He had given me a fake last name, and shortly after the encounter, his Instagram vanishes. He had multiple faceless accounts. He's deleted those too. I never talked to him again. And 2 years after, I see he uploaded a story to Snapchat. Lo and behold, it's my picture, of me in his car that first night he saw me. I didn't say anything, but he knew I saw it. Anyway, 9 years later, but I can't help but feel like one of those girls that got away from a serial nut job. Creepy, creepy. What would you do in that situation? Well, let's move into the next Reddit story. Is there gold in this rock? A little less than a year ago, I was staying in a hotel in a medium-sized city that was in a typically safe-ish area. As in, I could walk around by myself and generally feel fairly confident I wasn't going to get mugged or whatever. Down the street was a coffee shop that was open late that I would go to often during my stay there, since it was like a 3-minute walk away. I would usually go before sundown, but that day I had to finish a project I was working on, so I ended up going a little after the sun had set. The path there wasn't very well lit, with only a few scattered dim streetlights along the sidewalk. But it was such a short distance away that I wasn't worried at all. The walk there was fine. I got my chai quickly and started heading back. However, as I was walking up the hill back to the hotel, a man in a big black coat came out from behind a completely unlit area where the dumpsters were located by the side of the hotel and started approaching me. Obviously, this raised about 1,000,000 alarm bells, but it got so much worse when he started calling out to me asking me to stop. I turned my head, and that's when I noticed he was carrying a rock about the size of a basketball. As soon as I looked back, he said, Come over here and look. Do you think this rock has gold in it? As he held it beneath one of the flickering streetlights. I probably should have ran at that point, since the hotel entrance was only just a little ways up the hill, but I stopped and turned around. For some reason, whenever something scary or unnerving happens to me, my first reaction is to get angry, not scared, so that's exactly what happened. He tried asking again, but I interrupted him and said no, loudly. He tried to speak again, but I told him no again, and told him to get lost. I stared him down a bit, and he backed off. I stood watching him until he disappeared back behind the dumpsters, so he was far enough away where I could at least have a decent head start if he decided to come at me from the back, and then I booked it the rest of the way back to the hotel. I don't know what that dude's plan was, but just the fact that he was hiding behind dumpsters in the complete dark and was trying to get me to look closely at a giant rock for gold was slightly unnerving. It's definitely not the worst encounter I've ever had, but it was so odd that it stands out amongst some of the others. If you think that's creepy, wait for the next Reddit story. 2 weeks ago, I had an intruder enter my room as I slept. Not sure how to feel comfortable in my own home now. So this happened a couple weeks ago, and I'm just starting to kind of mentally return to normal. I still can't fully make sense of who it was or what they wanted, but it was a terror I hope to never feel again in my life. I've lived by myself in a fourplex since 2021 in a very safe area. I've never been spooked or worried about prowlers since I live on the second floor, and even though there's stairs, I always assumed that would be a deterrent for creeps somewhat. I can't even explain how little I worried about break-ins or prowlers, it just never really occurred to me. I went to bed much earlier than usual and locked my door, putting in the deadbolt as I usually do. It must not have engaged all the way. I woke up to a phone flashlight in my face around 11 p.m. I thought it was much later in the night, and was so disoriented, I momentarily assumed that I had accidentally turned my own phone flashlight on. I sleep with my phone in bed with me, and thought I was seeing it reflect off of some sort of surface. I started to realize that made no sense. At the exact same time I felt a knee pressing down on my mattress, and realized it was a man in a black hoodie trying to get into bed with me. I yelled, "What the fuck?" and got up and tried to run, but I was wearing my CPAP, and it snagged for a second, and dragged the unit off the nightstand, which made a loud crash. I backed out of my bedroom, all while facing him. He didn't try to really do much, but calmly walked after me while looking at his phone, smiling and saying, "Sorry, sorry, so sorry." By this point, I was yelling to get out of my place and had made it to the back door. I was hoping to get the attention of one of my neighbors. I had made it to the outside stairs and was screaming at him to leave. He was trying to play it casual and saying "lost" as if it was an accident that he ended up in my home. I got a brief glimpse of his face with his phone light as he was looking at it. He finally went down the stairs and left. I was so focused on calling 911, I didn't even pay attention to how he got to my place, which way he escaped. He left so casually. I was on my porch panicking pretty loud, and luckily my sweet older upstairs neighbor came out and stood with me. The cops eventually showed up and took some information, but ultimately I doubt they caught up with him. One was kind enough to stick around the street for a few hours, but of course I couldn't sleep for a solid 3 days after anyway, so that was moot. I have no idea who he was. I have no idea how he got in, or how he did it so quietly. I don't want to think about what his plans were. It makes me so nauseous. Maybe a week prior to the break-in, I had an odd encounter with a DoorDasher who was bringing me food. As he made his way up my outside stairs to reach my door, I heard at least 3 loud crashing noises, and then heard him straight up fall against my back door before knocking loudly and aggressively. My instructions said to leave the food and not to knock, so I looked through the peephole and yelled for him to please set the food down. He then, for the 4th time, loudly fell against my door, but was responsive and didn't seem angry or threatening. I ended up reporting him to DD because my food reeked of alcohol and he was driving drunk. My only other weird encounter on my street was with a young neighbor who used to stand in my driveway. He was on crutches and chain-smoked cigarettes. He would glare daggers to anyone in my building and stare almost threateningly. This was a whole 2 years ago, though, and it's rare I see him nowadays. I think I know in my gut that this was a random encounter with a stranger who chose my unit on a whim. I'm just hoping the paranoia goes away soon, and I can feel safe sleeping in my home again. I've added new security measures, and am trying to be positive. Moving into the next Reddit story, I might have met a serial killer. I was a teen runaway, heading back home to Washington from Montana. On February 25, 1997. I had two male companions, also teen runaways with me, and we had stopped at Quartz Flats Campground, rest stop in Montana for a break from our drive. It was snowing heavily as we left the rest stop. I could barely see the road to I-90 when I saw a man carrying a little boy, hitchhiking. My first thought was he was an idiot parent endangering his child, and that poor kid shouldn't be in a blizzard. It never occurred to me to wonder where his car was located. I picked him up so the boy wouldn't freeze. The man never offered any information about where he came from or where he was going. The man also did not realize when I picked him up that I had two teen boys in the back of my van. And he became unnerved and began speaking in this maniacal fashion about buying a boat in Arizona. You know where you get a good boat? Arizona. Do you know why? There's no ocean, so they sell them cheap. I was relieved when he turned to the boys in the back of my Plymouth Voyager and began talking to them so I could tune him out and concentrate on driving. The man had curly brown hair with a devil's lock in the front and a scar on his upper lip and his chin. The boy appeared to be between 2 to 4 years of age, wearing a blue coat, red or blue warm-up pants with either an offset red or blue seam on the pants, and light-colored boots that resembled construction boots. The boy would not look at any of us, nor did he turn to the man for comfort. Just looked down at the floor and didn't move from the man's lap. I felt bad for him, thinking he must be so scared of us. They were not with us very long, and the man asked to be let out at the gas station in Superior, Montana. And that was the end of that interaction. In 2017, I found true crime, and it made me reflect on 17-year-old me and the terrible risks I took, hitchhiking and picking up hitchhikers. I had a few disturbing rides, but the one that sticks out the most was the hitchhiker and the boy. On a whim, I Googled serial killers, I-90, and missing children. I remember the man looked like one of my hometown attorneys. Very distinctive eyes. I didn't really believe I would find any likely offenders, until I did. My heart dropped when I saw the devil's lock and scars on his lip and chin, and even more when I found a video he posted online, his maniacal voice, style and tone, matching the boat guy, Joseph Duncan III. The worst part was that there was a little boy that went missing in the same region 2 days prior. I connected with his aunt, and she connected me with the FBI, because I had provided a detail that they hadn't made public. If you've ever researched Duncan, you know that he was one of the worst human beings ever. He had a court date on the same day I would have picked him up, coincidentally his birthday, and there is no record of him showing up for that court date. There was a warrant issued for his arrest in 1997 for missing a court date, and by April, he absconded and ended up in California, where he took the life of another young victim. I wrote him a letter, and he wrote back and stated that he was not the man I picked up, but that I was very brave for picking up a hitchhiker. The letter is the weirdest thing I've ever received in the mail. One more thing. While I was looking into the timeline of Duncan, I reached out to the two teenagers that were with me at that time. They both said that it could be him based on the photos and in the video, but they couldn't be 100% sure. And then he asked to be let out at the next town. This gave me chills. How did you feel? Let me know in the comments. Meanwhile, let's move into the next Reddit story. Customer left me a weird note. Any advice is welcome, because I am genuinely terrified. I work in a bookstore and I genuinely enjoy my job, but I'm scared to clock in tomorrow after this disturbing encounter. So I was rearranging some stuff when one of my coworkers came up to me saying this guy asked to borrow a pen and paper, and he gave her the creeps. I brushed it off, and after like 10 minutes, she was at the register, and I came up to her to chat. She gave me a serious look and said, "Go in the back now, I'll tell you later." So I trusted her and went in the back, wondering what the hell happened. Minutes later, she goes in the back as well and says, "The creepy guy said he's in love with you and left you this." She handed me the paper he asked for with this eerie satanic-looking drawing, and I can't make out what the hell it is. And right below, he wrote some mostly illegible text with crosses and pentagrams. I could only make up something about him being in love with me and wanting to get to know me, and something about a specific belt with crosses that I do have but wasn't wearing today. So obviously he's been watching me on more occasions. Also, I could make up Queen and Flames and Te quiero para siempre. I don't live in a Spanish-speaking country. But most of it was pure gibberish and freaky drawings. He told my coworker he'll be back to ask for my phone number as well. At this point, I'm already shaking. We don't have security in my store, and I call my manager, who wasn't on shift. She says he most likely won't do anything else and just go in the back if he comes in, and let my coworkers tell him I'm not interested. Obviously, I feel very unsafe. I'm considering asking to be moved to a different location, and more than anything, I'm angry. I'm aware this guy is unwell, and most likely he deals with some mental health issues, but I'm angry people get to do this creepy stuff and lay their head on their pillow at night while ruining things for me and leaving me anxious and terrified. Small update. The assistant manager is in today and we looked at the footage together. The guy looks 40-ish and is very weirdly dressed. I'm 22, and he was speeding towards me as I went in the back, but I didn't notice him. He gave up trying to talk to me and went to my coworker to ask about me. She lied that my shift ended and I was going home, and he hung around the stockroom door waiting for me for like 10 minutes. I have no idea what he was planning to do. Update 2. For the moment, I've been temporarily relocated to another store in the chain. The guy returned about 2 weeks ago. He looked around for a bit and left. Coworker mentioned he was holding some flowers. He returned a few days later once again and attempted to leave another note on a tester for one of the pens we sell. This time security was called in before he could finish it. I believe there was some physical altercation involved. I'm planning to take this matter to the police. Update 3. There is a nearby store I frequently go to get my cigarettes, and I usually chat with the girl at the register. I mentioned this whole incident to her, and she asked to see the first note and the unfinished one from the last time. She looks very concerned and starts explaining to me that the notes aren't actually total gibberish. She mentioned she became interested in Satanism for a while after a certain trauma in her life, and while meditating, she would get pen and paper, and her hand would automatically start writing in the same creepy style and font as that guy. She said there's stuff in the notes along the lines of "she will be mine" and "we are made for each other." And she asked me if my name starts with A, because he keeps highlighting that letter. It doesn't. I am a skeptical person, and I don't exactly believe in this kind of stuff, but I thought this was worth mentioning. Moving into the next Reddit story. The last thing you'd want to see out your window at 1 a.m. while you're alone at home. This happened to me a few years ago, while I was still in college, but I've been watching a ton of those narrated true stories on YouTube and felt compelled to share my own experience. For some context, I'm Irish and was studying in the UK to get my bachelor's degree. I don't know how common this is elsewhere, but where I lived, it seemed to be common enough that landlords renting to students privately would convert the front downstairs room into an extra bedroom. This is where my bedroom was for my first year. I didn't mind it too much, but it was a bit weird having the front door directly in my room, and especially since, for those who aren't familiar with terraced houses in the UK, there isn't a front garden usually, and we just had a small section separating the front door from the path outside. By now I'd been living here for a few months, and I could recognize the difference in the sound of someone walking past on the path and the sound of someone stepping towards the front door. On the night that this happened, I was totally alone in the house, as both my housemates were away home for the weekend. This was a little unusual, since neither of them usually went home except for special occasions, but I think it might have been Valentine's Day around that time, or something similar. It was about 1 in the morning, and I was lying in bed and on the phone to my boyfriend at the time, as we were long distance. As we're talking, I could hear some footsteps outside, and immediately recognized that it was someone right outside the door. I kept listening and could just hear them shuffling around a bit, and then they started fumbling with the door handle. That spooked me, and I told my boyfriend that I was going to have a quick look out the window to see if I could spot whoever it was. I get up and part the curtains, and quite literally pressed my face and hands against the window to get a look outside, since it was pitch black by now and the streetlights had been turned off. It took a second then for me to realize what I was looking at. But whoever it was who was outside was doing the exact same thing that I was, pressed up against the window and staring in at me, inches away. I didn't scream. I just felt as if all the wind had been knocked out of me, and I remember feeling like someone had just dunked me into a pool of ice water. Whoever it was looked to be male. I couldn't see his face properly, but I just remember he was wearing a hoodie. He ran when he saw me, and after trying to collect myself, I quickly told my boyfriend and then rang the police. I don't remember how long it took for them to get there, but there wasn't a whole lot they could do. I think they might have done a quick patrol of the area, but nothing ever came of it. It was absolutely one of the most terrifying things that's happened to me, and I can't figure out at all why he was trying to break in. At the time, I had my light on, which would have been visible from the window, even with the curtains drawn. So I figured I could rule out that he was a junkie or squatter looking for a place to crash. I don't know if maybe he'd been watching me and my housemates for a while, seeing 3 girls living alone, and thought maybe this would make an easy burglary, or worse. But thank God I didn't have any trouble again afterwards. I couldn't sleep for days after. I remember staying up until the early morning, just watching movies on my laptop to feel less alone, until I eventually fell asleep from exhaustion once it started to get light outside. Since I was here from Ireland, I didn't even have any family members close by who I could call for, or go and stay with. And it was the most agonizingly long weekend of my life, waiting for my housemates to come back. I definitely think I've developed a slight phobia now of looking out the window while it's dark outside. Well guys, that's it for today. Did you like the Reddit stories? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time.